The whisper moved faster than the music, sharp and cruel, slipping between silk gowns and jeweled fans before it reached her ears. By the time Annalise Croft felt it, the sound of it was already a roar inside her chest. She stood beneath the great crystal chandeliers of the Ashworth ballroom, her hand resting lightly in Lord Richard Beaumont's gloved grasp, and believed her life was about to change forever. She was wrong. What unfolded instead would break her heart in front of everyone she knew and mark her as the most pitied woman of the season. The ballroom glowed like a dream brought to life. Candlelight spilled from the chandeliers and danced across polished marble floors. Music floated through the air, warm and steady, guiding couples into graceful turns. Ladies shimmered in silks and lace, their laughter rising and falling like gentle waves. Gentlemen stood proud in dark coats and polished boots, watching the room with careful eyes. It was the height of the London season, and every glance carried judgment, hope, or quiet hunger. Annalise felt all of it pressing against her skin. She wore a pale blue gown, simple in cut but carefully stitched by her mother's tired hands. Every thread held a prayer. The Crofts were not wealthy. Their townhouse was modest, their savings thin, and Annalise knew her future depended on more than love. Still, her heart had betrayed her. It had chosen Richard. Lord Richard Beaumont stood before her like something from a storybook. Tall, handsome, and confident, he smiled as if the world bent easily to his will. For 6 weeks, he had courted her openly. He danced with her at every ball, walked with her in the parks, and sent notes filled with charming words. Society had already decided their fate. An engagement was expected. A wedding would follow. Everyone knew it. "You are a vision tonight, Annalise," Richard said softly, lifting her hand to his lips. His voice was smooth and warm, and the simple intimacy of the gesture sent a thrill through her. The most radiant woman in the room, she blushed, lowering her eyes. "You are too kind, my lord." "I speak the truth," he replied, his thumb brushing the back of her hand. "Wait here for me. I must speak with my father. Do not move. I want everyone to see you waiting for me." Her heart soared. This was it. She nodded, smiling as he squeezed her hand and disappeared into the crowd. Annalise took her place beside a marble pillar, standing straight, her chin lifted. She could feel the eyes on her, measuring, judging, envying. She welcomed them. Let them look. Let them see what was coming. Minutes passed, then more. The orchestra began a new waltz. Couples spun past her, laughter echoing. She searched for Richard and spotted him across the room with his father, the Earl of Danbury. Another woman joined them, dressed in bold crimson, her jewels flashing like fire. Lady Beatrice Finch. A tight knot formed in Annalise's stomach. Lady Beatrice was everything she was not. Wealthy, powerful, the daughter of a marquess. Still, Richard had sworn his devotion. He had promised her. She watched as Lady Beatrice placed her hand on Richard's arm. She laughed loudly, leaning close. The Earl smiled with approval. Richard did not pull away. The music swelled, then stopped. A hush fell over the ballroom as the Marquis of Ashworth stepped forward. "My lords and ladies," he announced, "we are honored tonight by an announcement from the Earl of Danbury." Annalise's breath caught. Her pulse thundered in her ears. The Earl stepped beside the Marquis, his face glowing with pride. "It is my great pleasure to announce the formal betrothal of my son, Lord Richard Beaumont." Annalise felt the world tilt to the incomparable Lady Beatrice Finch. Applause exploded around her. Cheers. Smiles. Admiration. Annalise could not hear them clearly. Her chest felt hollow, as if something vital had been ripped away. She looked across the room. Richard stood beside Lady Beatrice, her hand resting on his arm. He met Annalise's gaze, and in his eyes she saw no regret, only cold amusement. A slight smirk touched his lips. The whispers began at once. She truly believed him. Poor girl. How embarrassing. She will never recover from this. Each word struck like a blow. Annalise's vision blurred. Her legs trembled. She tried to breathe, but the air felt thick and heavy. She wanted to run, but the crowd closed in, feeding on her pain. A tear slipped free, burning as it traced her cheek. Then the room shifted. The whispers died. The laughter froze. A heavy silence spread as a tall figure moved through the crowd. People stepped back without thinking, creating a clear path. Annalise felt a shadow fall over her. She looked up. He was dressed in black, severe and immaculate, broad shoulders, sharp features, dark eyes that missed nothing. Gideon Blackwood, the Duke of Northumberland, the ruthless Duke, a man feared and avoided, known for his cold nature and immense power. He stopped in front of her. He did not speak at first. His presence alone was enough. The room seemed to hold its breath. Then, without hesitation, he removed his coat and draped it over her shoulders. The heavy fabric wrapped around her like armor, chasing away the chill that had sunk into her bones.
"Miss Croft," he said quietly.
His voice was deep and calm, carrying authority without effort. "This display is beneath you. Do not give them the satisfaction of your tears." His words were firm, not unkind. They steadied her. He offered his arm. The gesture was shocking, scandalous, powerful. Annalise hesitated only a moment before placing her hand on his sleeve. The muscles beneath were solid and unyielding. Together, they turned and walked through the ballroom. Heads turned, eyes followed. Richard's face twisted with rage as the Duke passed without a glance. Outside, the cool night air greeted them like mercy. "My carriage will take you home," the Duke said. "Let the world talk." He released her arm and walked away, leaving her wrapped in his coat and the echo of his intervention. By morning, London buzzed with gossip. Annalise stayed inside, her mother ill with worry, her father silent with fear. When a black carriage stopped outside their home 3 days later, her heart sank. The Duke had sent for them. He arrived without ceremony, filling their small drawing room with his presence. He spoke plainly, revealing Richard's schemes and the danger facing the Croft family. Annalise listened, fear giving way to resolve. When he finished, he looked at her steadily. "I believe you are stronger than they think," he said, "and I intend to prove it." Her pulse raced. "What do you propose, Your Grace?" A faint, dangerous smile touched his lips. "An alliance." And in that moment, standing on the edge of scandal and ruin, Annalise Croft felt something she had not felt since the ballroom. Power. The word alliance echoed in Annalise's mind long after the Duke had left their house. Power was not something she had ever imagined holding in her own hands. It had always belonged to men like Richard Beaumont, to fathers and lords and wealthy families who decided a woman's fate with a smile or a shrug. Yet now, Gideon Blackwood had placed that word between them like a loaded weapon, waiting to see if she would dare to lift it. The next days passed in a strange blur. London continued to talk, of course. Whispers followed her name wherever it was spoken. Some said she was ruined. Others said she had caught the attention of a dangerous man and would soon disappear into his shadow. Annalise stayed inside, listening to the sounds of the city through closed windows, her emotions shifting between shame, anger, and something new that frightened her more than all the rest. Determination. The Duke returned the very next morning. This time, he did not come alone. A tall woman with sharp eyes and a measuring gaze followed him inside, carrying notebooks and pens. She introduced herself briskly as Madame Dubois and wasted no time on pleasantries. Annalise barely had a moment to greet her before she was being turned, measured, and studied like a valuable object. "You hide too much," Madame Dubois said, tugging lightly at Annalise's sleeve. "Not your body, your presence. We will fix that." Annalise glanced at the Duke, uncertain. He stood near the window, hands clasped behind his back, watching without comment. "Do you trust me, Miss Croft?" he asked without turning. She hesitated, then nodded. Yes, that single word seemed to settle something between them. From that day on, her world changed. Fine fabrics replaced the worn dresses in her wardrobe. Darker colors, stronger lines, gowns that demanded attention rather than begged for approval. But the Duke's lessons went far beyond clothing. Each afternoon he came to escort her for walks or carriage rides, always choosing places where others might see them. Hyde Park, the quieter streets near Green Park. He wanted her visible, "Society feeds on fear," he told her one afternoon as they watched other carriages roll past. "It loses interest when it senses control." He taught her how to stand, how to look, how to remain silent without seeming weak. He corrected her posture with a sharp word, her tone with a raised brow. At first she felt clumsy and exposed, but slowly something shifted. She stopped shrinking. She stopped apologizing with her eyes. Her father watched these changes with mixed fear and awe. "This is a dangerous game," he warned one evening. "I know," Annalise replied calmly, "but hiding will not save us." The Duke's presence unsettled her in ways she could not explain. He was not gentle. He did not offer comfort. Yet she felt safer beside him than she ever had with Richard. Gideon Blackwood never pretended to be kind. He was honest in his severity, and that honesty grounded her. As the days passed, the whispers grew louder. People speculated openly now. Why would the ruthless Duke invest time in a woman with no fortune and a ruined reputation? Some suggested she was his latest conquest. Others whispered darker theories. Annalise learned to let the words slide past her like wind, just as he had taught her. Then came the invitation. The Vauxhall Gardens Masquerade was the most anticipated event of the season. Masks would hide faces, and music would blur lines. It was the perfect stage. "They will be there," Gideon said simply when he handed her the invitation. She knew who he meant. Her stomach tightened. "And you want me to attend?" "Yes," he replied, "with me." The night of the masquerade arrived cool and clear. Lanterns lit the gardens like fallen stars, and music drifted through the air. Annalise stood before the mirror, scarcely recognizing herself. Her gown was midnight dark, shimmering softly, and the mask framed her eyes instead of hiding them. When Gideon arrived, dressed in black from head to toe, his gaze lingered on her for a moment longer than necessary. "You are ready," he said. She took his arm, feeling steady. The gardens were alive with laughter and movement. Masks hid identities but not intentions. Heads turned as they passed. Even in disguise, the Duke was unmistakable. His presence commanded space. They walked slowly, deliberately, letting the tension build. Annalise felt eyes on her, curious and hungry. Her heart beat fast, but she did not falter. Then she saw them. Richard Beaumont stood near the central promenade, laughing too loudly, his arm around Lady Beatrice. They wore extravagant costumes, dressed to impress and dominate. For a brief moment, old pain flickered in Annalise's chest. Gideon felt it. His hand tightened slightly on her arm. "Remember," he murmured, "you owe him nothing." They approached. Richard's laughter faded as he noticed the tall figure in black. His eyes narrowed at the masked woman beside the Duke. "Your Grace," Richard said stiffly. "A pleasure." "The feeling is distant," Gideon replied coolly, enjoying the evening. Lady Beatrice's sharp gaze swept over Annalise, lingering on her gown with open jealousy. "And who might this be?" she asked, her tone edged. Gideon smiled faintly. "Mystery is the entire point of the night." Annalise met Richard's gaze through her mask. She spoke lightly. "The gardens are beautiful this evening. Masks make everything feel more honest." His expression shifted. Unease flickered in his eyes. Before he could respond, a commotion rippled through the crowd. Uniformed men entered the promenade, their faces serious, their steps purposeful. Music faltered. Laughter died. They stopped directly in front of Richard. "Lord Richard Beaumont," one announced, "you are under arrest for fraud and conspiracy." The silence that followed was absolute. Lady Beatrice stepped back as if struck. Richard's face drained of color. "This is absurd," he protested. "On whose authority?" The officer glanced toward Gideon, who stood calmly beside Annalise. Richard followed the look. Recognition hit him like a blow. "You," he hissed. Annalise reached up and removed her mask. Gasps rippled through the crowd. She met Richard's gaze steadily. "It seems the truth does not enjoy being hidden." The officers took him by the arms. His shouts echoed as he was led away, stripped of pride and power. Lady Beatrice stood frozen, humiliated and exposed. Annalise felt something inside her loosen. The weight she had carried since the ballroom cracked and fell away. Gideon turned to her. "It is finished." But as they stood there amid the shocked crowd, Annalise realized something important. The game had changed her, and the alliance between her and the ruthless Duke was no longer just about revenge. It was becoming something far more dangerous. The arrest shattered the night like glass. Music stopped. Lanterns flickered. Whispers burst into frantic motion as Richard Beaumont was dragged away, his proud costume now a mockery of the man he had pretended to be. Annalise stood still, her mask hanging loose in her hand, her heart racing but no longer broken. The pain that once ruled her had been replaced by a calm, steady strength. People stared at her with open shock. Some recognized her at once. Others whispered her name as if saying it might burn their tongues. She felt their eyes, but they no longer pierced her. Gideon stood beside her, unmoved by the chaos, his presence solid and grounding. Lady Beatrice recovered first, her face twisted with fury and humiliation. Without a word, she turned and fled into the crowd, her fine costume forgotten. The night that had promised her triumph ended in disgrace. "Shall we go?" Gideon asked quietly. Annalise nodded. They left the gardens together, not hurried, not hiding. The whispers followed them, but they faded into the night. Inside the carriage, silence stretched between them, heavy and unfamiliar. "It is done," Annalise said at last. "Yes," Gideon replied. "Beaumont will not trouble you again." She looked at him then, really looked at him. The ruthless Duke, the man everyone feared. The man who had stepped forward when no one else had dared. "You did not have to do this," she said softly. "No," he agreed. "But I wanted to." The carriage rolled on through quiet streets. Lantern light passed across his face, revealing lines of weariness she had not noticed before. The days that followed were filled with aftermath. Newspapers printed the story in bold letters. Lord Richard Beaumont exposed, a fraudulent syndicate uncovered, fortune saved at the last moment. The Earl of Danbury retreated from society in disgrace. The Ton devoured every detail, and always Annalise's name appeared beside the Duke's. She became something new in the public eye. No longer a pitied girl, but a woman who had survived public ruin and returned stronger. Invitations arrived, letters of admiration, polite requests for visits and introductions. She declined them all. Her life had shifted, and she felt no desire to step back into the same narrow role she had once accepted. Gideon continued to visit, though never unannounced, never improper. Sometimes they spoke of practical matters, sometimes of nothing at all. Their conversations grew easier, warmer. The sharp edge between them softened. One afternoon, he found her in the small garden behind her home, kneeling beside a rose bush. She wore a simple dress, her hair loose, her hands smudged with soil. "You are improving the garden," he observed. "It needed care," she replied with a smile. "Neglect nearly killed it." He understood the meaning behind her words. They walked together along the narrow path. "You have regained everything," he said. "Your family is secure. Your reputation is restored." "Yes," she said, "but I have gained something more valuable." He waited. "Myself." They stopped near the stone wall, ivy climbing its surface. The city noise felt far away. "Why did you truly help me?" she asked gently. "Not the reason you gave others. The real one." He looked at the ground for a long moment before answering. "When I was young," he said slowly, "I watched my mother be torn apart by whispers and accusations. She stood alone. No one defended her, not even those who owed her everything. She never recovered." His voice remained steady, but pain lived beneath it. "When I saw you standing there, surrounded by cruelty, I saw her, and I realized I could not walk away again." Annalise reached out, resting her hand lightly against his sleeve. "You saved me," she said. "No," he corrected quietly. "You saved yourself. I only opened the door." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. In the weeks that followed, their bond deepened. It was not loud or dramatic. It grew in quiet moments, shared understanding, mutual respect. They spoke of books, of philosophy, of the future. Gideon listened in a way few ever had. Analyze challenged him in ways no one dared. Society watched closely. Speculation returned, louder than before. Would the Duke claim her? Would he discard her now that the danger had passed? Bets were made, assumptions formed. They ignored them all. One evening, Gideon invited Annalise to dine at his residence. The house was vast and silent, filled with shadows and history, yet with her presence it felt less cold. After dinner, they stood near the tall windows overlooking the park. The city lights shimmered beyond the glass. "I have spent my life building walls," Gideon said. "Power, control, distance, they kept me safe. And now?" Annalise asked softly. "And now," he said, turning to her, "I wonder what would happen if I let one person inside them." Her heart thudded. "I do not want to be a rescue," she said firmly, "or a possession." His gaze was steady. "I would never offer either." "What do you offer?" she asked. "Partnership," he replied. "Choice, respect." She smiled, emotion tightening her throat. "Then I accept." He reached for her hand slowly, giving her time to pull away. She did not. Their kiss was quiet, unhurried, filled with trust rather than desperation. Two people meeting as equals, shaped by pain, but no longer ruled by it. When news finally broke of their engagement, London reacted as it always did. Shock, debate, fascination. But this time, Annalise did not listen. She stood beside Gideon in the garden, sunlight warming her face, her heart whole. Her story had begun with public heartbreak. It ended with a love forged not from illusion, but from strength, choice, and courage, and that made it unbreakable.